15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. Ignition sequence start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Launch commit. Liftoff. We have liftoff with a...
Wow, what an incredible day. Here we are to launch this church, and it's just incredible to get to celebrate these things. And as we kind of start this new series called Trajectory, really for the next 4 weeks, we're really going to be digging into this idea of what is it that God has us aiming for? Because a lot of times, you're not going to hit your target if you, one, don't define it, and if two, you just kind of happen to stumble into it and things happen by accident. Usually, you hit your target because you're intentionally aiming at it, right? I mean, you saw that video just a second ago, that rocket lifting off. I mean, do you think the guys at NASA just kind of, maybe put like I kind of imagine it this way. They put like a hunter's scope, the scope on the rifle, they put it on the rocket, and then they just kind of look through it and they're like, there's the moon, let's aim for that, That's not usually how they line up their trajectory. In fact, usually it looks a lot more like this. It looks like very complicated equations. It looks like a physics equation. I hope we have it. Do we have the physics equation?
Yeah.
There it is. Can we clap for our tech team, by the way? These guys are awesome. I love it. See, now usually if you were to work for NASA, you couldn't just be like, let's go there. No, it's usually we gotta figure everything out. We gotta input the right things. We gotta run things through the right equations, right? And sometimes you have to factor things with gravity, and sometimes you have to factor things without gravity, because things function differently with or without gravity. And so there's different equations for both. And if you're like me, you look at that and you're like, I throw in the towel, I'm done, never want to be an astronaut in my life, right? Because that thing can be kind of scary. And sometimes if we think about where it is that God's calling us as a group of people, sometimes it just gets really complicated. And trying to figure out the right equation to get to our destination can get really confusing. And when we get confused, when we get kind of scared of these kinds of things, we have the tendency to just want to stay where we're at and let's stay comfortable. Let's not worry about that. I'm sure we'll just kind of make our way there. Well, this morning, as we launch this new church, as we spend time celebrating the launch of this new church, we want to launch very intentionally. We're not just going to kind of show up on Sundays and kind of hope things happen and maybe someday we'll see something good happen. Instead, we know that God's calling us to a very specific landing spot. We know what our destination is. And if you're going to launch anything, you launch a rocket, you launch a church, you launch anything, there's two things you better know, right? The first one is you better know where you're going. You got to know where the landing spot is. You got to know what that looks like, right? The destination, you got to know what that looks like. And two, you got to know how to get there, right? So this morning, I want to just take a few minutes and really talk about, one, where we're going, and two, how we're going to get there. It's amazing. I was reading a book a couple weeks ago, and it talked about how if in NASA, if they were launching a rocket, and let's say they wanted to hit the planet Mars, okay, and they got their sights set on Mars, and they want to hit Mars. If their trajectory is off only an inch, just from here to there, that's it. That's an inch right there. If their trajectory is off by just an inch when it launches from Earth, it will miss Mars by 800 miles. Isn't that incredible? Just an inch. Just an inch will cause it to miss by 800 miles. You see, we could launch this church and we could have a pretty good idea of where we're going. But if we're off just a little bit, we're going to miss 10 years from now. We're going to be in a completely different place than where God's called us. And so today, we want to be real clear. Here's where we're going. Is there going to be time for course correction? Absolutely. In fact, we'll talk about that in a couple of weeks. But today, we're going to define where is it we're going and how are we going to get there. Open up a Bible or an app on your phone if you have it to 1 Thessalonians this morning. 1 Thessalonians chapter 2. Go ahead and pull out your phone, iPad, whatever, if you have a Bible app on there. If you have a smartphone and you don't have the Bible app, download it. It's already been downloaded over 100 million times. Isn't that cool? 1 Thessalonians chapter 2 is where we're going to be. In verse 8. This verse really is kind of what's steering us. It's helping us define where it is we're heading. In fact, you'll see it on that big poster right back there. It's where we're going. 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 8. Paul is writing this letter to the people of Thessalonica. In fact, these are people who he has been in the trenches with. He has been doing ministry with. But then because of persecution, Paul had to leave them and go somewhere else and serve somewhere else. And so he's writing this letter from that place back to the people in Thessalonica. And these are people he has really built relationships with. These are people who he's built incredible bonds with. And you're going to hear it here in verse 8. Listen to this. Paul says, "We loved you so much that we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but also our lives as well, because you had become so dear to us. We loved you so much that we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well." What Paul is starting to get into here is really part of the DNA that we're trying to establish. And really he defines what the landing zone looks like. He really describes the destination for us. And in that, when he says sharing the gospel and sharing our lives, really there's two things in there. And this is what set our DNA. God has called Rhythm City Church to become a rippling movement of communities where everyday people follow Jesus together. No doubt about it, that's where we're going. And in that are two things. One, we're going to be making disciples. We better make disciples. Jesus talks a lot about that. He spent his whole life here on earth, or his 3 years of ministry, doing that. We should be intentional about that. And two, we should be about connecting the disconnected. The reason why you're in a concert venue this morning is because this is a place that people who don't go to church just might come to church. This might be a place where people would recognize, I went to a concert last night. I feel pretty comfortable there. We want people to know that they're safe here. That's so important to us. But that's not enough for connecting the disconnected. We know that God's calling us to share our lives with each other, to share our lives with other people. That's what Paul is taking so much joy in right here, is that not only do we share the gospel with you, but we're also sharing our lives too. Connecting the disconnected, making disciples. Connecting the disconnected. Will you say that? Connecting the disconnected. Good. And now say, making disciples. Making disciples. That's where we're going. You see, when that rocket hits Mars, you know real quick if it's hit it or not, don't you? It has hit its target. We weren't off by any bit. Our trajectory was spot on. We nailed our target. See, church, if we're going to win, if we know what the landing spot looks like, then it's going to look like disconnected people getting connected to the life of the church and the life of Jesus. And it's going to look like people sharing their lives with each other in a way that disciples are made regularly, or just happens naturally. That's where we're going. But the other question is how are we going to get there? A lot of times I get the question, so Dave, Rhythm City, that name, Rhythm City Church, what is it? I mean, we know it's kind of cool because it's Nashville, Music City, Rhythm City. Okay, I can see the connecting to that, so that's really neat. But really, Rhythm City is more about this, a church that is for the city and full of a lot of people that are living a relational rhythm of life together. The rhythm is not just what you heard up here this morning and will hear yet before you go home. The rhythm is really a set of relationships, and it's this focus on relationships that God's calling us to invest in. So those three relationships are very simple, and maybe some of you have heard me say this before, but it's good to hear it again. Those relationships are threefold. One, up, our relationship with God. We see it all the time, how Jesus takes time. Even as he's doing ministry on the earth, he would withdraw from his disciples and go off to a solitary place, and he would pray, he would engage in his relationship with the Father. He would do that regularly. And my guess is, if Jesus is doing it, we should do it. So, let's invest in our relationship with God. You all with me? Say up. Up. Good. The second one is in. This is how God calls us to make disciples. The journey was never meant to be taken alone. And maybe you've experienced church in a way, or maybe you've heard friends who've talked about church in a way where it's just a Sunday morning and really everybody says nice things to each other on Sunday morning, but when it comes to what happens during the week, or who's walking alongside them in this journey, or who's holding them accountable, or who's there when everything else just falls apart, sometimes the church is the last thing we think about, or the people in the church are the last people we think about. Really, the church should be the first place that people go to have people encouraging them and loving them and embracing them and challenging them and loving them to change. And so God calls us to invest in our relationships with each other, and that's in. Say in. Good. The third one then is out. We are all about, Rhythm City Church is not here to be another flavor of church for Christians in Nashville to choose from. We've got Baskin-Robbins on steroids already in this city. We don't need more flavors of church for people to choose from. What we need is many more churches. We need many more churches in this city that are all about going after people who think God's grace has run out on them, going after people who have been burned by the church, people who hate the church, people who feel like they've been judged by the church and never want to go back again. People who never see themselves ever being a part of a church again. We want to go after them. Not just invite them on Sunday. That's a good thing. But we want to go serve them. We want to mobilize our people to be in their lives, in their communities, in our neighborhoods, loving them right where they're at, in the middle of their workplaces, in the middle of when life is falling apart. We want to be right there loving them in that. Because don't you know that's the most incredible glimpse of what Jesus did for us? In the middle of all your mess, when things are falling apart, when life isn't just quite what you want it to be, and you've got guilt weighing on you, you've got secrets in your closet that you don't want anybody else to ever find out about, and that stuff just weighs on you and holds you back. And when all that stuff is just weighing on you, don't you know it's Jesus who comes to you? Right? That's the glimpse of Jesus being born in the manger. He's not just this God that's out there somewhere, but boom, he moved into the neighborhood. He made himself human, was there in full presence, fully God, fully man, on the earth, in the middle of messy people's lives, so that he might bring good news to them, not just preach it from a stage or a pulpit. Jesus is moving into people's lives to bring them good news. We want to be about that. So that means we go out from here on Sunday morning. So it's up, in, and what's the third one? Out. Hey, you guys are sharp this morning. We should clap for yourselves. Will you guys clap for yourselves this morning? And so we've established something called Core Group. In fact, you'll see some stuff on your tables and stuff, and you can get plugged into a Core Group. If in just a few minutes, when we come around and collect the offering, if you would just fill out that connection card there, it says, we're glad you're here on the backside. If you would fill that out and just let us know you're here. And if you want to get plugged into a Core Group, that's what it's all about. It's about being a part of that community, and in that community, you're experiencing up, in, and out. You're experiencing how God himself is working in our city. One of those movies that just tends to really grab my attention is Apollo 13. Have you seen Apollo 13? Yeah? And at the beginning of that movie, man, there's just some scenes in there that just really kind of grab you, and you're on the edge of your seat, and you're just, are they going to make it? You know, and one of those scenes where you're just really excited, you're fully enveloped in this scene is at the very beginning of the movie. where they begin to launch off, right? And they're counting down. You can see the countdown. The families are there together, and they're holding hands, and they're praying, and they're excited. They want to celebrate the launch of this mission to the moon, right? And so when it gets off the ground and it disappears out of sight and they know they're up in space, everybody starts to celebrate and everybody's really happy for what's going on. But then later on in the movie, we learn of some complications, don't we? And things start to go awry and equipment malfunctions and things aren't going the way that it should. And in that, it grips you again. You're like, are they going to make it? Are they going to get back home? Forget the mission to the moon. We just want them to get back home, right? And after all of that turmoil, after all of the hardship, after figuring out how to make things happen and make sure we have enough oxygen and all that stuff, make sure we have everything we need to get back home, after all of that, finally, they break through the Earth's atmosphere, they splash down in the ocean, but nobody knows if they're alive or not. They don't know if the heat shield held up, right? And so the whole nation is waiting to hear the good news. The people in the flight station at NASA are just waiting to hear confirmation from those helicopter pilots that are flying out to go get them. And it's silent. Nothing's happening. Are they alive? Did they make it? And then finally the good news comes through. We have found them and they're all alive. You know what's amazing? Once that gets publicized and the news tells everybody, you know, they've made it, they're alive, everybody just goes crazy, don't they? They just go ballistic, celebrating that these people who we thought were going to be dead, we didn't think they were going to make it. In fact, all the odds were against them. They're alive. That's worth celebrating. And if you were to compare the kind of celebration that happened on the day when that rocket launched and the celebration that happened when they landed and they found out that they were alive, I don't even compare. When they landed, that celebration was far greater than the celebration at the launch, wasn't it? Because they've made it. These people who we thought were never going to make it are now alive, and we can hug them, they can be reunited with their families, and that's something to really celebrate. I don't know about you guys, but as we celebrate today, this is really great. I'm really excited. We're going to celebrate more this week. We're going to tell the story of what God's doing here today. I don't know about you guys, but I want a far greater celebration someday. I want to see people who everyone else is giving up on. I want to see them made alive in Jesus. I want to see people who don't have any kind of chance. Nobody's giving them a shot. Because they're too far gone, they're too addicted, they're too much a part of this, they hate the church that much. I want to see great celebration here and in heaven over those people who God makes alive. Today is about a launch. But today we head for seeing a rippling movement of communities where everyday people follow Jesus together. And if that happens, if we make it there, if God leads us to that destination, then here's what I know. There's going to be a far greater celebration someday. There's going to be a bigger celebration. It's going to be louder. There's going to be more people. And God's going to do something amazing. That's what I want to be a part of. That's what the Rhythm City Church family is selling out for. It's what they're giving their lives towards. And if you don't have a church home, but you know that God is just inching you towards that, calling you to give your life away so that others might live, so that there might be a greater celebration down the road someday, then I pray that you found your church home today. And I pray that for those of you that have a church home, that we don't leave here today without forgetting where it is God's taken us. It's to connect disconnected people, and it's to make disciples. Everything else in your life, I'm just going to shoot you straight, is completely meaningless. God's calling us to make disciples out of people who are waking up this morning in the wrong person's bed, hungover from a concert they were here to last night. Those are the people that God is going to bring to his church and restore, because he makes dead people alive. He breaks the chains of addiction. He sets guilt aside and gives new hope and life in Jesus. He's doing that for us today, and he's doing that for our city through us. So as we launch today, let's celebrate a lot. But let's look forward to the greater celebration that's coming someday. Amen.